Good morning. Dear students, we begin lectures on normal anatomy. We have only 3 lectures during this semester. Today's lecture will be dedicated to the great and important part of the normal anatomy, osteology. Pay attention to the slides with information that will help you better understand this material. Study of the human body structure for the first year students is enough difficult, especially for the foreign students. Human anatomy is a science which studies the form and structure of human body. The term anatomy from Greek word anatemno means to dissect, to separate. The developmental process of a given individual beginning at the moment its conception until death is called ontogenesis. In other words, this is a process of individual development of the organism. The ontogenesis is divided into 2 stages, which differ considerably from one another: intrauterine and extrauterine. The intrauterine period encompasses the period of ontogenesis from conception until birth, prenatal period. The extrauterine postnatal period continues after birth until death. The science which studies early stages of the intrauterine period is called embryology. Drastic deviations from the species norm which appear during the developmental process are called anomalies. In the picture, you can see anomalies of the oral cavity and anomaly of the upper limbs, anomalies of the phalanges. Also, very important for normal anatomy is information about anatomical axes and planes. We have 3 anatomical axes: the vertical, the sagittal, and the frontal axis. And also we have 3 very important planes: sagittal planes, frontal plane, and horizontal or transverse plane. The sagittal plane divides the body into right and left symmetrical halves. The frontal plane divides into anterior and posterior halves. And horizontal plane divides the body into the superior and inferior halves. Bone development. We have 3 phases of bone development. membranous, cartilaginous, and osseous. Skeletal tissue originates from the mesenchyme, which is concentrated around the cord and neural tube, forming embryonic skeleton. Skeleton system composed of bones, cartilage, joints, and ligaments. Skeletal system include axial division and appendicular division. Axial division contains skull and associated bones. Auditory, ossiculus, hyoid bone, vertebral column, ribs and sternum. Appendicular division consists of pectoral girdle, pelvic girdle, and bones of the upper and lower limbs. Look at the slide, please. You can see all structure of the axial skeleton. We have axial division and can see skull together with auditory ossiculus and hyoid bone, vertebral column, ribs, and sternum. Functions of skeletal system. Support, hard framework that supports and anchors the soft organs of the body. Protection surrounds organs such as the brain and spinal cord. Movement allows for muscles attachment, therefore the bones are used as levers. Storage. Minerals and lipids are stored within bone material. Blood cell formation. The bone marrow is responsible for blood cell production. Classification of bones. All bones of the human body subdivide into tubular bones, sponge bones, flat bones, and irregular bones. Long bones also subdivide into long and short tubular bones. Long tubular bones are typically longer than wide. Have a shaft with heads at both ends. Contain mostly compact bone. Examples: femur, humerus. Short tubular bones are generally cube-shaped, contain mostly sponge bone, for example, carpals, tarsal. Sponge bones are long, ribs and sternum, and short, vertebra, carpal and tarsal bones. And last type, flat bones. For example, scapula, pelvic bones, parietal and frontal bones. Irregular bones have complex and variable shape and cannot be classified. Bones of the base of the skull. Tubular bone, flat bone, irregular bone, sponge bone. Compact bone have outer layer of bone very hard and dense. Originate in structure units called Hawaiian system. Matrix is composed of calcium salts, calcium carbonate, and calcium phosphate. Osteocytes live in bone cells that live in matrix. Sponge bone located in the ends of long bones, many spaces that are filled with red bone marrow which produce bone cells. Sponge bone consists of trabecle, needle-like threads of sponge bones that surround the species. are strange to this portion of the bone. Cartilage. Matrix is a firm gel with chondrocytes suspended in the matrix. In the picture, you can see long tubular bone with diaphysis and epiphysis. Diaphysis is the central portion of the tubular bone, epiphysis, peripheral portion. Diaphysis are soft and composed of compact bone. Epiphysis, ends of the bone. Proximal epiphysis and distal epiphysis, composed mostly of sponge bone. Medullary cavity, cavity of the shaft, contains yellow marrow, mostly fat in adults. Contains red marrow for blood cell formation in infants. Microscopic anatomy of bone. Osteon Haversian system, a unit of bone. Central Haversian canal, opening in the center of an osteon, carries blood vessels and nerves. Perforating canal, canal perpendicular to the central canal, carries blood vessels and nerves. Osteon, Haversian canal, perforating canal. Inside, you can see blood vessels and nerves. Types of bone cells. Osteocytes, osteoblast, osteoclast. Bone remodeling is a process by both osteoblasts and osteoclasts. Periosteum, outside covering of the diaphysis. Fibrous connective tissue membrane. Sharpest fibers secure periosteum to underlying bone. Arteries supply bone cells with other structure of the bone. Bones of the cranium. The skull, cranium, constitutes of skeleton of the head, which encloses the brain and sensory organs. The skull consists of numerous bones joined together by suture. The only bone that has a movable articulation with the temporal bone is the mandible. The skull is divided into two parts, neurocranium and the visceral facial skeleton. Neurocranium consists of the frontal, parietal, occipital, behind, temporal, sphenoid, and ethmoidal bone. Visceral cranium includes the maxilla, mandible, palatin, zygomatic, nasal, lacrimal, hyoid bone, as well as the lower nasal concha and the vomer. Also, skull has calvaria, skull cap, the upper convex part of the skull, external surface of the cranial base, basis cranii externa, the lower portion of the skull facing outward, and internal surface of cranial base, basis cranii interna, the lower portion of the skull facing the cranial cavity. Flat bones of the skull display the outer and inner list and a layer of bone separating them. External list, lamina externa, made of compact bone. Diploid contains diploid canals, canales diploici, which give passage to the veins. Internal list, lamina interna, consists of a thin layer of compact bone. Short information about clinical application. The internal layer is also known as a vitreous plate, lamina vitrea, because in case head injury, it breaks even when the integrity of the external plate is retained. This can lead to the damage of brain matrix. The vertebral column consists of 34 vertebrae, 24 individual vertebrae, sacrum, coccyx. So we have 7 cervical vertebrae, 12 thoracic vertebrae, 5 lumbar vertebrae, 5 sacral vertebrae, 4-5 coccygeal vertebrae joined together. Sacrum forms the posterior wall of pelvis, formed from 5 fused vertebrae. Superior surface articulates with feet lumbar vertebrae. Inferior articulates with coccyx. Anterior v posterior. Body of the sacral vertebra, sacral promontory. Ala, Latin term ala. Apex. Anterior sacral foramen. Transverse line. Posteriorly, you can see medial sacral crest, intermediate sacral crest, lateral sacral crest, auricular surface, superior auricular process, sacral canal, sacral hiatus, coccyx. Bony thorax forms the framework of the chest, component of the bony thorax, thoracic vertebra posteriorly, ribs laterally, sternum and costal cartilage anteriorly. Projects thoracic organs, supports shoulder girdle and upper limbs, provides attachment sites for muscles. Anteriorly sternum, laterally ribs, posteriorly vertebral column. Sternum formed from 3 parts: manubrium, body, xiphoid process. Again repeat. Manubrium, body, xiphoid process. Jugular notch, incisura jugularis. Clavicular notch, incisura clavicularis. Ribs notch, incisura costalis. Xiphoid process, processus xiphoideus. Manubrium, superior part, articulates with medial end of clavicle. Body bulk of sternum, sides articulate for costal cartilages of ribs, from 12 to 7. Xiphoid process, inferior end of sternum, situate around age 40. Ribs, costal. All ribs attach to vertebral column posteriorly. So we have 2 ribs, costa vera, false ribs, costa spuria, latent ribs, costa fluctuantis. 2 ribs are superior 7 pairs of ribs attached to sternum by costal cartilage. False ribs are inferior 5 pairs of ribs attached indirectly to the sternum. Latent ribs, or ribs number 11 and 12, are short and free anteriorly. Disorders of the exoskeleton. Abnormal spiral curvature. scoliosis, and abnormal lateral curvature, kyphosis, and exaggerated thoracic curvature, lordosis, and inward lumbar curvature, swayback, and stenosis of the lumbar spine and narrowing of the vertebral canal. The appendicular skeleton allows us to move and manipulate objects. Includes all bones other than exoskeleton. It includes the limbs, upper and lower limbs, and pectoral and pelvic girdle. The pectoral girdle, also called the shoulder girdle, connects the arm to the body, positioned to shoulders, provides a base for arm movement. The pectoral girdle consists of scapula, right and left, clavicula, right and left. Connect with the exoskeleton only at the manubrium and form clavicular-sternal joint. The upper limbs, arms, forearms, wrists, and hands. Brachium, arm, brachium. Humerus. The humerus, also called the arm, the long upper arm bone, articulates with the pectoral girdle. The forearm, also called the antebrachium, consists of two long bones, ulna, medial, and radius, lateral. The wrist. Consists of 8 carpal bones. For proximal carpal bones and for distal carpal bones, allow wrist to bend and twist. Metacarpal bones consist of the 5 long bones at the hand. Numbered from 1 to 5, from lateral thumb to medial. Articulate with proximal phalanges. Phalanges of the hands. Thumb, has 2 phalanges, proximal and distal, and fingers. have three phalanges: proximal, middle, and distal. The pelvis consists of two osacoxes, the sacrum and the coccyx. Stabilized by ligaments of pelvis girdle, sacrum, and lumbar vertebra. The osacoxa are also called hip bones, strong to bear body weight and stress of movement. Each is made up of three fused bones: ilium, articulates with sacrum, ischium, and pubis. The acetabulum, also called the hip socket, is the meeting point of the ilium, ischium, and pubis, articulates with head of the femur, and form hip joint. The lower limbs functions weight-bearing motion. The lower limb consists of leg and thigh and feet. Bones of the lower limbs: femur, thigh, patella, kneecap, tibia and fibula leg, tarsals ankle, metatarsals foot, phalanges toes. The tibia, also called the shin bone, supports body weight, larger than fibula, medial to fibula. The fibula attach muscles of feet and toes, smaller than tibia, lateral to tibia. Bones of the ankle, tarsals, talus, calcaneus, heel bone, transfers weight to ground, attaches Achilles tendon. Feet, metatarsal bones, consist of 5 long bones of foot, numbered from 1 to 5, medial to lateral, articulate with toes. Toes, phalanges. Phalanges, bones of the toes. Hallux, big toe, consist of 2 phalanges, distal and proximal. Asaphotars consist of three phalanges: distal, medial, and proximal. Arches of the foot. Bones are arranged to form three strong arches: two longitudinal, median and lateral, and one transverse. Ligaments and tendons help to hold the bones firmly in the arch position, but still allow a certain amount of sprigginess. Weak arches are referred to as flat foot. So, dear students, I try to describe for you today information about osteology. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Goodbye.